A cold wind howls across the rolling hills of Ireland, bending the gnarled trees like whispers from the past. Through the thick mist, a shadow moves, a figure astride a black horse, its hooves striking the earth with unnatural silence. But when the fog parts, the truth chills the blood. This rider carries no head upon his shoulders. This is the Dullahan, one of the most terrifying spectres in Celtic folklore, a harbinger of doom whose very presence spells death for those who dare to meet its gaze, or worse, hear it call their name. Have you ever wondered what lurks behind the tales of headless phantoms that haunt our darkest stories? What primal fears do they embody, and why do these eerie figures persist across centuries and cultures? The Dullahan isn't just a ghost story to frighten children. It's a creature steeped in ancient symbolism, a remnant of Ireland's rich mythological tapestry that speaks to something deeper, the uneasy boundary between life and death, the unknown that waits beyond the veil. Picture this, a headless rider clutching its own severed head like a lantern, its hollow eyes scanning the night for its next victim. In some tales, it carries a whip made from a human spine. In others, its voice alone can strike a person dead where they stand. But where did this nightmare come from? Is it merely superstition, or does it hold fragments of a forgotten truth about the Celtic world's beliefs and fears? Tonight, we're unraveling the mysteries of the Dullahan, tracing its roots from whispered campfire tales to its surprising connections with other headless horsemen across Europe. This isn't just about a phantom, it's about the cultural echoes of a legend that refuses to die. By the time we're done, you'll see these stories in a new light, understanding how they reflect the fears, values, and even the humor of the people who kept them alive. So stay close and keep your wits about you. The road ahead is dark and the Dullahan rides tonight. The name Dullahan itself whispers secrets of its origins, a word carved from the Irish language steeped in the same shadows that birthed the legend. Derived from Dullahan, meaning dark man or gloomy one, it's a title that chills the bones as much as the spectre it describes, but language, like folklore, is never static. Across Ireland's misty valleys and rugged coasts, the creature takes on other names, each revealing another layer of its terrifying identity. In some regions, it's called Gan Ceann, literally headless, a blunt, visceral label that strips away all mystery, leaving only the grotesque truth. These names aren't just random monikers, they're linguistic artifacts, echoes of a time when words held power over the unseen. To speak of the Dullahan was to risk summoning it, and so the names themselves became spells of sorts, a way to acknowledge the horror without inviting its attention. Compare this to other Celtic death omens like Scotland's Bean Nye, the washerwoman who foretells doom, or Wales's Gearach y Ribbon, a hag whose wail signals impending death. Each name is a key unlocking cultural fears about mortality and the unknown. But why Dark Man, the Irish Dullahan, hints at something more than mere headlessness. It paints a figure shrouded in gloom, a bringer of night in both literal and metaphorical senses. This isn't just a ghost, it's an embodiment of endings, a shadow that rides the line between worlds. Even the act of naming it ties back to ancient taboos. In many Celtic traditions, speaking the true name of a malevolent spirit could hasten its arrival. So people whispered, inventing indirect titles, weaving protections into language itself, and the Dullahan isn't alone in this dance of names and meanings. The Welsh Adar Llwch Gwyn, or birds of the wine lake, were spectral creatures foretelling death, their name a poetic yet ominous mask. In Brittany, the Ancu, another grim reaper figure, shares the Dullahan's relentless purpose. These linguistic threads stretch across Celtic lands, binding folklore to place and history. When we unravel the Dullahan's name, we're not just dissecting a word, we're tracing the fingerprints of an entire culture's relationship with fear, death, and the stories that make them bearable. The Dullahan's appearance isn't just frightening, it's a grotesque masterpiece of horror, every detail meticulously crafted to unsettle the soul. Picture a towering figure clad in flowing black robes, its headless torso radiating an unnatural aura of dread. Where its head should be, there's only a ragged stump, yet it carries its own severed head like a macabre lantern clutched in one skeletal hand. That head, pale and rotting, is far from lifeless. Its hollow eyes glow with a sickly yellow light, flickering like candle flames in the dark, and its mouth curls into a perpetual grin, as if savoring the terror it inspires. Some say the head's lips move silently, whispering the names of those marked for death, while others claim it simply watches, its gaze freezing the blood of anyone unfortunate enough to meet it. Then there's the whip, a barbed, sinewy thing fashioned from a human spine, cracking through the night air with a sound like breaking bones. Each lash is said to summon the spirits of the dead, or worse, sever a living soul from its body. The Dullahan rides a monstrous black horse, its coat slick as oil, its eyes blazing like embers plucked from hellfire. Every hoofbeat lands in eerie silence, as if the beast treads on something other than earth. Behind them, a spectral wagon sometimes rolls, its wheels shrieking like a banshee's wail, a sound so piercing it can shatter windows or drive men mad. But these aren't just random elements of horror. Every aspect of the Dullahan's form is steeped in symbolism, a visual language of mortality. The head, separated yet animate, embodies the duality of life and death, consciousness lingering beyond the grave. The spine whip, a brutal reminder of the body's fragility, the ease with which life can be snapped away. Even the silent horse speaks volumes, its noiseless steps mirroring death's sudden, stealthy approach. And that screaming wagon, it's the cry of the dying, the inevitability of the end arriving whether we hear it coming or not. This is more than a monster, it's a walking, riding memento mori, a reflection of humanity's oldest fear, the moment when the spark of life gutters out. The Celts didn't just fear death, they personified it, gave it a face, or in this case took the face away, and in doing so they created a legend so visceral, so unnervingly specific, that it still haunts us centuries later. The Dullahan doesn't merely wander the countryside, it serves as death's own messenger, a relentless courier of fate with a singular, chilling purpose. When this headless spectre rides, it carries more than its own severed head. It holds the names of those whose time has come, whispering them into the night air like a judge reading a sentence. To hear your own name uttered by the Dullahan is to hear your death warrant signed in real time, a moment so final that some legends claim victims dropped dead on the spot, their souls ripped away before the echo fades. But there's an even darker twist. If the horseman reins in his steed and stops before a house, it means someone inside will perish before dawn. No pleading, no bargaining, just the grim certainty of what's to come. This isn't random terror, it's a system. In Irish folklore, the Dullahan follows strict, almost bureaucratic rules, appearing primarily in regions like County Sligo, where the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest. Here, the land itself seems to remember the old ways, the shadowed glens and crumbling castles serving as stages for the horseman's grim theatrics. Unlike ghosts that haunt specific locations, the Dullahan is a traveler, its path dictated by an unseen ledger of the dying. And while it shares the island with other omens like the wailing Banshee, their methods couldn't be more different. Take the Banshee, Ireland's other famous herald of death. Where the Dullahan is silent until it speaks your name, the Banshee fills the night with her cries, a mournful warning meant for entire families, not just individuals. She's a sorrowful figure, her grief as genuine as it is terrifying, tied by bloodlines to the soon-to-be deceased. The Dullahan, by contrast, shows no emotion, no pity, no rage. It's a force of pure finality, its presence as impersonal as a falling guillotine. While the Banshee laments, the Dullahan executes, yet both creatures reveal something profound about how the Irish once viewed death, not as an end but as a transition marked by signs and rituals. The Banshee comforts in her way, offering a chance to prepare to say goodbye. The Dullahan offers no such grace. It's a reminder that death doesn't always knock gently. Sometimes it kicks down the door. And in that distinction lies the true horror of the Dullahan. It's not just bringing death, it's enforcing an order far older than human fear, a law written in something darker than ink. To understand the Dullahan's true nature, we must journey back before Christianity's reach, when Ireland's mythology pulsed with older, darker gods. The horseman's origins may lie with Crom Dubh, a shadowy deity whose name means the dark bent one, a figure associated with harvest, sacrifice, and the turning wheel of life and death. Crom Dubh wasn't merely feared, he was venerated, a god who demanded offerings to ensure fertile land and survival. Legends whisper that his worship involved decapitation rituals, a brutal yet sacred exchange, a life given to sustain the community. The severed head, in Celtic belief, wasn't just a trophy, it was a vessel of power, a bridge between the mortal world and the other world. This reverence for the head symbolism might explain why the Dullahan, headless yet wielding its own as a lantern, strikes such a primal chord. Archaeology supports this grim connection. Across Celtic Europe, from the bog bodies of Ireland to the temple sites of Gaul, evidence of head cults abounds. Skulls were mounted on poles, preserved in springs, even placed beneath foundations as protective charms. The Celts believed the head housed the soul's essence, and capturing an enemy's head meant seizing their strength. In this light, the Dullahan's grotesque appearance isn't random horror, it's a twisted reflection of ancient rites, a ghostly echo of rituals that once ensured survival. But history is written by the victors, and when Christianity spread across Ireland, the old gods were recast as demons. Crom Dubh, once a complex figure of both terror and reverence, became a malevolent shadow, his rituals reframed as barbaric. The Dullahan emerged from this cultural alchemy, no longer a god's servant but a damned spirit, a warning against clinging to the old ways. Christian scribes, recording folklore centuries later, painted the horseman as a hellish figure, stripping away its ties to cyclical sacrifice and leaving only the fear. Yet traces of the truth linger. In some regional tales, the Dullahan doesn't just bring death. It collects souls with the precision of a harvest, a faint memory of its agrarian roots. This transformation wasn't unique to Ireland. Across Europe, pagan spirits were reinvented as monsters. Norse Draugr became ghouls, Slavic house spirits turned into trickster demons. But the Dullahan's case is especially striking because its form, the severed head, the spine whip, retains such visceral ties to pre-Christian practices. It's as if the culture, even in condemning the past, couldn't fully erase its fingerprints. The horseman rides a line between two worlds, carrying not just death's inevitability, but the unresolved tension between old beliefs and new faiths. To meet the Dullahan is to confront something far older than a ghost story. It's to face the unburied bones of history itself. Among the fog-laden nights of the Celtic year, none held more dread or more significance than Samhain, the festival marking summer's end and the beginning of winter's dark embrace. This was no ordinary turning of seasons. For the ancient Irish, Samhain was a liminal moment, a night when the barrier between the living and the dead grew thin as parchment, and the unnatural walked freely among the mortal world. And of all the spirits crossing that threshold, none was more feared than the Dullahan, whose power surged to its zenith as the harvest fires burned low. Imagine the scene: villagers huddled under a moonless sky, doors barred with iron nails, windows crisscrossed with salt or rowan branches, anything to ward off the headless rider's gaze. To venture outside after dark was to gamble with fate, for the Dullahan rode with purpose on Samhain, its whip cracking like distant thunder as it gathered souls like a farmer reaping grain. Some say it carried a list of names written in phantom ink, while others believed it simply knew, drawn to its quarry by an invisible thread of destiny. Either way, the rituals to evade its notice were precise. families left small offerings at crossroads, a bowl of milk, a handful of grain, not as tribute, but as distraction, a way to buy time by occupying the horseman's attention. But why this night? Samhain wasn't just a date on the calendar, it was a cosmic tipping point. The Celts saw time as cyclical, and Samhain was the hinge between light and dark, order and chaos. With the year's vitality fading, the rules of reality softened. The dead returned to warm themselves by hearths, fairies played tricks on the unwary, and the Dullahan, already a creature of thresholds, became unstoppable. Its silence mirrored the hush of the dying year, its headless form a grotesque symbol of the world losing its head as winter's disorder took hold. Yet traces of these ancient fears still linger in our modern Halloween. The jack-o'-lantern's flickering grin, a distant cousin to the Dullahan's own glowing skull, a way to mimic and mock the terror it inspired, the tradition of costumes. Perhaps rooted in the idea of disguising oneself from vengeful spirits, even the thrill of ghost stories told in the dark carries an echo of those long-ago nights when every rustling leaf might signal the horseman's approach. The difference, of course, is that today we've tamed the terror into tradition. Where once the Dullahan's ride meant genuine dread, now it fuels our love of the macabre, a reminder that even the darkest legends can be stripped of their fangs by time. But peel back the candy wrappers and plastic masks, and you'll find the old fear still pulsing beneath the surface. When the wind moans just right on an October night, or when a shadow moves too swiftly at the edge of sight, something primal stirs. The Dullahan may be confined to folklore now, but its power wasn't just in its appearance, it was in what it represented. The uncontrollable, the inevitable, the moment when the veil parts and we glimpse what waits beyond. Samhain's magic lies in that tension, the delicious thrill of flirting with the unknown while knowing, deep down, that some doors are better left unopened. The Dullahan's wagon rolls through the night like a nightmare given form, a grotesque carriage cobbled together from yellowed bones, its wheels screeching as if in agony with every turn. Lit by flickering candles made not of wax but of human tallow, the wagon casts flickering shadows that seem to writhe against the ground, stretching and twisting like the souls it gathers. This isn't just transport, it's a mobile tomb, a hearse for the not yet dead, its very presence marking the air with the metallic tang of impending doom. Witnesses from 19th century Ireland swore the wagon moved without horses, pulled instead by unseen forces, its path weaving between our world and whatever lies beyond. But the wagon's horror isn't merely in its construction, it's in what it represents. Folklore tells of those who glimpsed it passing their homes at midnight, its skeletal frame rattling as it slowed, a pause that meant death would claim someone within before dawn. Some accounts describe shadowy hands reaching from its barred windows, fingers curling as if plucking unseen offerings from the air. Others speak of a chorus of muffled sobs drifting in its wake, the voices of those already collected, their souls packed tight as cargo. The Dullahan's grim procession finds eerie echoes in Europe's wider mythologies. Compare it to the Wild Hunt, that ghostly cavalcade led by figures like Odin or Herne the Hunter, where the dead ride en masse, their spectral forms sweeping across the sky. Both are relentless, both serve death, but where the hunt is chaotic, a storm of lost souls, the Dullahan's wagon is methodical, almost judicial in its precision. Then there are the ferry processions of Celtic lore, the She Slua, where the owls she parade in otherworldly splendor. These too move with purpose, but their wagons gleam with enchantment, not rot, they lure rather than terrify. The Dullahan's wagon, by contrast, offers no allure, only inevitability. 19th century folklorists like Patrick Kennedy and Thomas Crofton Croker recorded chilling testimonies of encounters with the wagon. One farmer in County Kerry swore he saw it halted near a crossroads, its bone-white ribs glistening with dew, while a figure, headless of course, counted shadowy shapes in the ditch beside it. Another tale from Sligo tells of a drunken man stumbling upon the wagon at dusk, mistaking it for a neighbor's cart until he noticed the candle's flames burned blue and cold. He fled, but not before hearing his own name whispered from within. He was dead by week's end. What makes these accounts so unsettling is their consistency. Whether in Kerry or Donegal, the details align: the stench of decay, the unnatural silence of the wheels until they shriek like a banshee, the way the wagon's presence seems to leach warmth from the air. This isn't the scattered variation of mere superstition. It's the coherence of something deeply ingrained, a shared cultural trauma given flesh, or rather given bones. The wagon's symbolism is clear. Death comes for everyone, and when it does, it doesn't walk, it rides. If you want to trace the Dullahan's path, start where the land itself feels alive, with old Magic County Leitrim's shadowed valleys, where the fog clings to the ground like a burial shroud. Here, near the village of Drumshanbo, a crumbling stone arch stretches over a rushing stream, known locally as Dullahan's Bridge. Folk tales warn that passing beneath it after dusk invites disaster, for this is one of the horseman's favored gateways between realms. The bridge isn't just a crossing for the living, it's a threshold where the unseen world bleeds through, and the Dullahan rides where boundaries are thin. Crossroads, too, hold a deadly allure for the headless spectre. In Irish tradition, intersections of roads were seen as places of power, neutral ground where spirits could manifest. The Dullahan is said to pause at these junctions, its skeletal fingers tracing invisible names in the air before choosing a direction. Some legends claim it collects offerings left by desperate villagers, coins, herbs, even drops of blood, as tolls to spare their homes. But these aren't acts of mercy, they're transactions, echoes of older customs where appeasement kept darker forces at bay. Then there are the oak groves, ancient and whispering. Ireland's sacred trees, especially those struck by lightning or grown gnarled with age, were believed to harbor the owls she, the fairy folk. The Dullahan rides their outskirts like a sentinel, its presence a grim reminder that even the fairy's beauty hides teeth. In County Sligo, storytellers still point to a lightning-scarred oak near the Gleneffe Horseshoe, where the horseman was once seen circling at midnight, its headless silhouette framed against the moon. Modern sightings, though rare, cling stubbornly to these same landscapes. In 1982, a farmer in County Roscommon swore he saw a headless figure on a black horse galloping through his barley field, the crops untouched by its passage. A decade later, backpackers near the Barra Peninsula reported hearing the whip crack of bone on air, though nothing was there. Skeptics dismiss these as tricks of light or fatigue, but the consistency is haunting. Whether memory or malice, the Dullahan's route remains etched into the land, as real to those who believe as the soil beneath their feet. What makes these locations so potent isn't just their folklore, it's their geography. Leitrim's misty lowlands, Sligo's jagged cliffs, Roscommon's lonely fields, these are places where isolation sharpens the imagination, where the wind sounds like voices and shadows move when nothing casts them. The Dullahan doesn't haunt cities or crowded lanes. It thrives where the modern world falters, where old stones remember older stories. To walk these roads at night is to tread the edge of a story still being told, one where the next rider in the dark might not be mortal at all. Facing the Dullahan wasn't a death sentence, not if you knew the old tricks passed down through generations. The Irish, ever resourceful in the face of the supernatural, devised ways to turn the horseman away, and at the heart of these defenses lay one seemingly ordinary metal, gold. A simple coin tossed in the spectre's path could force it to halt, as if the creature's very nature recoiled from the glint of it. But why gold? The answer lies in the clash of symbols. To the Celts, gold wasn't just wealth, it was sunlight made solid, a fragment of solar power wrested from the earth. The Dullahan, a creature of moonless nights and choking darkness, couldn't endure its radiance. Like dawn scattering shadows, gold disrupted the horseman's terrible purpose, if only for a moment. Some tales even speak of farmers wearing gold rings to bed during Samhain, the metal warm against their skin as a whispered prayer against the rider's approach. Names, too, held power in this deadly game of hide and seek. If the Dullahan called your name, death followed, so the cleverest hid theirs like buried treasure. Mothers would refuse to speak their children's names aloud after sundown, referring to them only as the little one or this child. Travelers caught on the road at night might give false names if challenged by a voice in the dark, a desperate ruse to confuse the horseman's hunt. There's a chilling account from County Kerry of a man who, hearing his name hissed from the shadows, immediately shouted another man's name 3 times into the wind. By dawn, his neighbor was found dead in his bed. The Dullahan, tricked by the substitution, had taken the wrong soul. Divine intervention offered another slim hope. Crossing oneself or invoking Saint Michael, the archangel who cast down darkness, might buy precious seconds to flee. Iron, that ancient bane of fairies and spirits alike, could be hammered into door lintels or sewn into clothing seams, its cold presence repelling the supernatural. Even the humble oatcake left at crossroads or crumbled over thresholds was said to distract the Dullahan, its mundanity somehow offensive to the spectre's grim grandeur. But the most famous escape belongs to a drunkard from Kildare, a man whose quick thinking turned the horseman's own rules against him. Catching sight of the Dullahan on a lonely road, he flung himself into a ditch, clutching a gold coin in one fist and a handful of salt in the other. As the rider drew near, the man hurled the salt into its path. The Dullahan recoiled, its horse shying away, not from fear but from obligation. In Irish folklore, salt scattered on the ground demanded counting, grain by grain, a task even death couldn't ignore. By the time the spectre finished, the man had vanished into the night, saved by superstition's strange arithmetic. These protections weren't just about survival. They were acts of defiance, small victories in humanity's eternal struggle against the inevitable. The Dullahan might be relentless, but it wasn't infallible. Every whispered name avoided, every gold coin tossed, was a reminder that even in the face of certain doom, the human spirit fights to delay the dark. And sometimes that's enough. Among the many spirits haunting Ireland's folklore, the Dullahan stands apart, not as a mischievous trickster or a sorrowful omen, but as something far more ruthless. Compare it to the Púca, that shape-shifting enigma of the fairy world, who might lead travelers astray one night and save them from harm the next. The Púca thrives on chaos, its motives as fluid as its form, alternating between menace and mercy. The Dullahan offers no such ambiguity. Where the Púca might nudge you into a ditch for its own amusement, the Headless Horseman doesn't play games. Its arrival is a verdict, not a prank. Then there's the Banshee, Ireland's most famous harbinger of death. Her wails are steeped in sorrow, a lament for those about to depart, her ties bound by bloodlines and ancient loyalties. The Dullahan shares her role as a death messenger, but where the Banshee mourns, the horseman executes. One weeps, the other collects, and while the Banshee's cry is a warning, a chance to prepare to gather loved ones, the Dullahan's silence is its terror. You won't hear it coming until it's too late, until your name hangs in the air like a sentence passed. Yet for all its autonomy, the Dullahan isn't entirely free. Some tales suggest it answers to the Owls She, the fairy folk who rule Ireland's hidden realms. In these stories, the horseman becomes less a force of nature and more a servant, a spectral enforcer dispatched by fairy nobility to punish those who transgress their laws. Picture a farmer who cuts down a sacred hawthorn or a drunkard who stumbles into a fairy ring at the wrong hour. The Dullahan might be sent to ensure the debt is paid, its whip cracking not just for death but for justice or what the fairies deem just. This shifts the creature's essence. If it's a tool of the Owls She, then its horror carries a twisted logic, a reminder that even death can be wielded by higher powers. But other legends paint a darker portrait, that the Dullahan was once human, a guardian or warrior cursed for some unspeakable sin. Perhaps they betrayed their clan or defied the fairies or failed in a sacred duty. Now they ride eternally, their punishment intertwined with their purpose. The severed head they carry, it might be their own, a grotesque emblem of their fall from grace. There's a haunting duality here. Is the Dullahan a mindless reaper or a tormented soul bound to its grim task? The answer depends on which hillside you stand on, which storyteller you ask. In Kerry, they'll swear it's a fallen knight doomed to serve the fairies for 1,000 years. In Sligo, they'll say it's death itself wearing a stolen face. But perhaps the most unsettling version comes from Leitrim, where old whispers claim the Dullahan wasn't cursed at all. It chose this path, trading its humanity for power, only to realize too late that power without a head to where it is just another kind of chain. What unites these threads is the Dullahan's inescapable nature. Whether fairy, weapon, or damned soul, it operates beyond mortal appeals. The Púca can be bribed with a handful of grain. The Banshee might spare a child for a mother's tears, but the Dullahan, it follows older, colder rules, and that's what makes it unique among Ireland's spirits, not just its headless horror, but the sheer inevitability of its ride. When the fairies command it, or when the curse demands it, nothing, not gold, not prayer, not even the love of the living, can steer it from its path. The first written whispers of the Dullahan didn't emerge from some ancient manuscript hidden in a monastery. They spilled from the pens of 19th-century folklorists like Thomas Crofton Croker, whose fairy legends and traditions of the south of Ireland captured the spectre for literate audiences in 1825. Picture this, a world where oral tales passed through generations were suddenly pinned to the page like butterflies under glass, their colors still vivid but their wildness subdued. Croker's Headless Horseman wasn't just a peasant's nightmare anymore. It was a curated artifact dressed in Gothic prose for Victorian readers who thrilled at a safe brush with Celtic savagery. His Dullahan retained its menace but gained a sheen of romanticism, less a genuine folk belief than a macabre character in a fireside drama. Compare this to earlier, rawer accounts scribbled in parish records or travellers' journals. In 1782, an English clergyman touring County Cork recorded locals crossing themselves at the mention of the Headless Coachman, describing it as a thing neither fully spirit nor man, but a hollow between worlds. No poetic embellishments, no moral lessons, just raw fear etched in ink. Yet by the time Croker's volumes reached London drawing rooms, the Dullahan had become part of a fashionable obsession with authentic folklore, its edges sanded down for genteel consumption. The spine whip became a scepter of bone, the rotting head a lantern of ghastly luminescence. This wasn't deception, it was translation, an attempt to bridge the gap between illiterate storytellers and an audience hungry for exotic thrills. The transformation reveals as much about the collectors as the legends. Croker and his contemporaries, including William Carleton and Patrick Kennedy, were often Anglo-Irish scholars straddling two cultures. Their renditions smoothed over regional variations, merging dozens of local ghouls into one iconic figure. Take the Donegal tradition of the Gan Ceann, a headless giant who carried his skull under his arm like a bowling ball. Croker folded this into his Dullahan, creating a composite creature more dramatic than any single village version. Oral tales had been fluid, changing with each teller. Printed words fossilized them, turning living stories into specimens. Yet for all their tidying up, these early texts preserved something vital. Without Croker's fairy legends, we might have lost the chilling account of a Kerry midwife who claimed to bandage the Dullahan's severed neck with fairy linen, or the tale of a Sligo blacksmith who shod the spectre's horse and found the hooves ice cold despite the forge's heat. These details, polished though they were, still carry the shiver of genuine belief. They remind us that the Dullahan wasn't born on the page but dragged onto it, kicking and screaming, from a world where the unseen was as real as rain. The irony, these romanticized versions circled back to influence oral tradition itself. By the late 1800s, country folk began weaving bookish flourishes into their own stories, proof that folklore isn't a one-way street but a conversation, with pens and tongues shaping each other across centuries. So when you read Croker's description of the Dullahan's eyes glowing like polluted stars, you're not just seeing a Victorian fantasy, you're witnessing the moment a nightmare learned to wear a top hat and found it fit all too well. Washington Irving's Headless Horseman rides through American folklore with a pumpkin in place of a skull, a far cry from the Dullahan's rotting lantern head, yet the similarities are too striking to ignore. Published in 1820, the legend of Sleepy Hollow emerged just as waves of Irish immigrants flooded New York, bringing their tales of the headless spectre with them. Ichabod Crane's infamous pursuer shares more than a missing neck with the Dullahan. Both are silent stalkers of the night, both wield whips, though Irving's horseman trades a spine for mere leather, and both embody the terror of the unknown, barreling out of darkness to claim their victims. But is this literary phantom a direct descendant of Irish folklore, or did two cultures independently conjure the same nightmare? The timing begs for connection. By the early 1800s, Irish communities in the Hudson Valley would have been swapping stories of the Dullahan around hearths and taverns, their traditions seeping into local lore. Irving, a consummate collector of regional oddities, likely heard these tales firsthand. His horseman mirrors the Dullahan's role as an omen. Though where the Irish spectre heralds unavoidable death, Irving's is more trickster than executioner. The pumpkin-headed ghoul doesn't whisper names, it hurls its own gourd like a grotesque prank, leaving poor Ichabod humiliated but alive. This shift from fatal enforcer to spooky prankster speaks volumes about cultural adaptation. America, land of second chances, couldn't stomach a villain as merciless as the Dullahan, so Irving softened the edges, trading dread for dread-laced comedy. Yet archetypes of headless riders stretch far beyond Ireland. Germanic folklore boasts the Dullakopf, a headless soldier doomed to patrol battlefields, while Dutch settlers told of the Kopfloser Reiter, a Hessian mercenary haunting backroads. Even pre-colonial Mesoamerica had the Tzitz-Mime starred demons depicted as headless torsos. Could Irving have drawn from these instead? Possibly, but the Dullahan's specificity stands out. The whip, the horse, the silent pursuit, these aren't generic ghost traits, they're fingerprints. The Hessian of Sleepy Hollow loses his head to a cannonball, a mortal wound, while the Dullahan never had one to begin with. One is a ghost, the other is something older, a personification of death itself. What clinches the link is Irving's own literary diet. He devoured European folklore, weaving it into distinctly American settings. His journals mention Irish superstitions alongside Dutch and German tales, and Sleepy Hollow's patchwork of cultures makes it fertile ground for hybrid monsters. The Horseman isn't a pure Dullahan, it's a remix, a new world echo of an old world terror, stripped of its fatal bite but keeping its skeletal grin. That Irving set the story in a Dutch enclave, not an Irish one, only proves his genius for synthesis. The Dullahan didn't cross the Atlantic intact, it shed its darkest traits along the way, emerging as something new, a Halloween boogeyman rather than a herald of the grave. But perhaps the most telling difference lies in the endings. The Dullahan's victims don't return. Ichabod Crane, he vanishes, but gossip hints he survived, fleeing to New York to become a lawyer, a wink from Irving that even our deepest fears might be illusions. The Dullahan offers no such hope. It's a relic of a worldview where death couldn't be outrun or outwitted, only endured. Irving's Horseman, then, isn't just a watered-down import. It's a testament to how stories morph when they take root in fresh soil. The pumpkin, after all, is native to America. What better symbol for a legend that shed its old skin and grew something new? From Disney's Darby O'Gill and the Little People to the grim expanses of The Witcher 3, the Dullahan has galloped into modern pop culture, though rarely with its original terror intact. Take the 1959 Disney film, where the Headless Horseman appears as a spectral coachman in a whimsical parade of fairy folk, more carnival attraction than omen of death. This sanitized version reflects Hollywood's habit of sanding down folklore's sharper edges, turning the Dullahan into a spooky set piece rather than a genuine threat. Yet even here, traces of the legend linger: the coachman's silent presence, the way he serves the ferry king, even the eerie glow of his lantern, all faint echoes of the Irish original, stripped of their bite for family audiences. Video games, by contrast, often embrace the Dullahan's brutality. In The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt, the creature appears as a high-level boss known as the Headless Horseman, its design dripping with gothic horror. This version wields a massive axe, its severed head dangling from its saddle like a grotesque trophy, a far cry from the lantern-carrying spectre of folklore, yet undeniably terrifying. The game borrows the Dullahan's association with death and the supernatural but grafts on Slavic influences, blending myths to create something fresh. Interestingly, it retains the idea of the horseman as an unrelenting force. When Geralt encounters it, there's no bargaining, only combat. In this way, the game captures the spirit, if not the letter, of the legend. Comics and graphic novels take even greater liberties. In Hellboy: The Wild Hunt, the Dullahan is reimagined as one of the titular Hunt's riders, its origins tangled with Arthurian myth and Lovecraftian horror. Here, the horseman's decapitation isn't just a visual quirk, it's a curse, a punishment for some long-forgotten sin. This version leans into the idea of the Dullahan as a tormented soul, a theme present in some regional Irish tales but amplified for dramatic effect. Meanwhile, Japanese manga like Grey Man transplant the creature into entirely new contexts, portraying it as a demonic weapon under human control. These adaptations may stray far from the source material, but they highlight the Dullahan's versatility as a symbol, one that can morph to fit any culture's nightmares. What's fascinating is how these modern takes reflect contemporary anxieties. Where folklore's Dullahan represented the inevitability of death, today's versions often embody more personal fears: loss of identity, the severed head; unchecked rage, the savage attacks in games; or existential dread, the cursed state in comics. The horseman's core remains a headless figure tied to doom, but its meaning shifts with the times. Even in Overwatch, where the character Reaper shares no direct link to the Dullahan, the aesthetic of a hooded, death-dealing phantom borrows from the same well of imagery. Yet for all the creative reinventions, few adaptations capture the Dullahan's most chilling trait: its silence. In folklore, the horror isn't in the spectacle, but in the whisper of your name in the dark, the knowledge that no amount of running will save you. Modern media loves a loud, flashy monster, but the true Dullahan doesn't need to roar. It simply arrives. Perhaps that's why the most faithful portrayal might be in The Hallow, a 2015 horror film set in rural Ireland. Here, the creature is glimpsed only in shadows, its presence felt more than seen, a reminder that sometimes the oldest fears are the ones that linger longest, even when the headlights of progress shine bright. Beneath the Dullahan's whip and rotting grin lies something far older than folklore, a mirror to the human psyche itself. Decapitation wasn't just a violent end in ancient warfare, it was a primal violation, a severing of identity as much as life. The Celts, like many Iron Age cultures, knew this intimately. Warriors displayed enemy heads as trophies, believing they trapped the soul's essence. The Dullahan's missing head, then, isn't just a ghastly flourish, it's a walking trauma, embodying the terror of losing not just one's life but one's very self. Why does this image haunt us so deeply? Because the head houses the face, the voice, the gaze, everything that makes us recognizable. To imagine it gone is to confront the ultimate erasure. But the horror runs deeper than physical violence. Carl Jung's shadow archetype, the repressed, darker half of the unconscious, finds a perfect avatar in the headless rider. The Dullahan doesn't just bring death, it personifies the parts of ourselves we bury: guilt, shame, the deeds we'd rather forget. Its lantern head, glowing with unnatural light, could symbolize the unbearable moment these hidden truths surge into awareness. Consider how often the spectre appears to those already marked by secret sins: the cheating spouse, the dishonest merchant. Is the Dullahan merely a phantom, or is it the mind's own punishment manifesting what the guilty cannot face? Freudian interpretations take this further. The spine whip, so meticulously crafted from human bone, mirrors the self-flagellation of a tormented conscience. The silent horse, perhaps the steady, inevitable march of consequences, inescapable as hoofbeats in the night. Even the gold that repels the Dullahan fits this framework, a symbol of purity or enlightenment pushing back against the darkness within. The legend thrives because it externalizes a universal struggle, the fear that our worst impulses, left unchecked, might one day ride us down like a spectre on a black horse. Yet the Dullahan psychology isn't purely punitive. Some scholars see it as a twisted guardian enforcing societal taboos. In a culture where oral tradition was law, the threat of a headless enforcer ensured adherence to communal values. Break the rules and the Dullahan might come calling not just for you, but to shame your family, your village. This communal aspect transforms the spectre from a personal nightmare into a social contract written in fear. Modern psychology offers another lens: sleep paralysis. Many accounts of the Dullahan's visits, the crushing weight on the chest, the inability to scream, mirror this phenomenon. Could centuries of waking nightmares have crystallized into a shared hallucination, complete with spine whip and screaming wagon? It's a compelling theory, but folklore resists easy explanations. The Dullahan is too specific, too consistent across regions to be chalked up to misfiring neurons alone. Perhaps the truth lies in synthesis. The Dullahan isn't just a warrior's fear, a Jungian shadow, or a sleep demon. It's all these things woven together. Cultures build myths to explain the unexplainable, and what's more inexplicable than the moment when conscience, consequence, and biology collide? The horseman rides because we need it to, because some truths are too terrible to face without a story to hold them at bay. And in that way, the Dullahan is still doing its job, keeping the darkest parts of us just distant enough to bear. To grasp the Dullahan's nightmare, you must first understand the sacred weight Celtic warriors placed on the human head. In Iron Age Ireland, the skull wasn't just bone. It was a vessel of power, a trophy that captured the essence of a fallen foe. Take the legend of Culan's Hound, where the hero Cu Chulainn beheads his enemies and mounts their heads on spikes, not out of cruelty, but as a ritual act. These grisly displays weren't mere intimidation, they were spiritual transactions. The Celts believed the soul resided in the head, its wisdom, its courage, its very identity. By taking it, the victor absorbed the dead warrior's strength, turning battlefields into macabre galleries of stolen potency. Now twist that image inside out. The Dullahan isn't the hunter clutching trophies, it's the hunted, forever severed from its own head, yet forced to carry it as a grotesque parody of that ancient tradition. Where warriors once brandished skulls as proof of dominance, the Dullahan's lantern head illuminates only its own damnation. This inversion cuts to the heart of Celtic dread. What happens when the taker becomes the taken? When the ritual meant to empower instead curses? The spectre's existence mocks the very customs that birthed it, a walking contradiction, both heir to head cults and their eternal victim. Archaeology confirms how deep this symbolism runs. At the Temple of Intremont in Gaul, stone pillars are studded with niches holding carved skulls, while Irish bog bodies like Old Croghan Man show deliberate decapitation, their heads possibly displayed as offerings. The message was clear: to lose your head was to lose your place in the cycle of honor and memory. The Dullahan embodies this existential terror, not just death, but the erasure of legacy. Its whip of human spine compounds the horror, echoing the warrior's belief that the backbone housed courage. Every element screams of stolen valor, of rituals gone horribly wrong. Consider the myth of the god Crom Dubh again, who demanded heads to ensure fertile soil. The Dullahan inverts this too. Instead of giving heads to nourish the land, it takes them with no higher purpose. Its decapitations aren't sacred, they're sterile, mechanical. This shift mirrors how Christianity demonized pagan practices, turning life-giving sacrifices into senseless slaughter. The horseman doesn't harvest heads to feed the earth. It hoards them like a miser, a perversion of the old ways. Yet there's a chilling logic here. In a culture that measured worth by the heads you claimed, what worse fate could there be than becoming headless yourself? The Dullahan isn't just a warning about death. It's a cautionary tale about pride, about the folly of building power on stolen lives. Its eternal ride is the price of breaking the cycle of taking without giving back. The warrior's trophies were meant to balance the scales. The Dullahan proves what happens when they tip too far. When Christianity swept across Ireland like a cleansing fire, it didn't just convert the pagan masses, it reshaped their nightmares. Crom Dubh, once a complex deity of harvest and sacrifice, was dragged from his altar and recast as a bloodthirsty demon, his name whispered with the same dread as Satan himself. The church's playbook was ruthless. Take a figure of reverence, strip away nuance, and rebrand it as pure evil. But the Dullahan's transformation is where this religious rebranding gets especially twisted. Its headlessness, which might have once symbolized spiritual transcendence or cyclical rebirth, became a grotesque parody of Christian martyrdom. Take Saint Denis, the 3rd century bishop who, according to legend, picked up his own severed head and walked 6 miles preaching sermons. The church celebrated this as divine triumph, proof that faith outlives the body. But when the pagans told of a headless rider, the clergy spun it as the opposite, a soulless husk damned to wander for its sins. The irony is thick enough to slice. Both stories feature severed heads carried by their owners, yet one is holy, the other horrifying. The difference. Control. Saint Denis's decapitation served God's glory. The Dullahan's existence mocked it. By the 12th century, Irish monks were transcribing local folklore with a quill dipped in holy water, scrubbing away any trace of pagan sanctity. Crom Dubb's rituals, once vital to ensuring fertile crops, were rebranded as devil worship, his offerings twisted into proof of barbarism. The Dullahan, already fearsome, gained new layers of damnation, no longer a spectral enforcer of natural order but a hell-bound fiend. This wasn't just slander, it was spiritual warfare. The church knew folklore's power, so instead of erasing the old myths, they hollowed them out and filled them with new meaning. The fairy mounds where the owls she dwelled, demonic portals, the sacred oak groves, haunts of witches, and the Dullahan, a damned soul, its whip now a symbol of infernal torture rather than cosmic balance. Even the gold that repelled it took on Christian overtones, the purity of saints versus the corruption of demons, yet traces of the old beliefs bled through. In some rural tales, the Dullahan still collects souls not for hell but for the otherworld, a vestige of its pre-Christian role. The church could dress the spectre in demonic rags, but they couldn't entirely sever its roots. Like a stubborn weed, the truth kept pushing through the cracks in the dogma. The Dullahan, caught between heaven and hell, became a battleground, its very existence a silent protest against the idea that all monsters kneel to the cross. Headless phantoms don't just haunt Ireland's misty glens, they gallop through the nightmares of cultures worldwide, each iteration revealing how societies wrestle with the same primal fear, loss of identity. Take Wales' Cephal DW circumflexar, a spectral water horse that lures riders onto its back before vanishing beneath waves, sometimes leaving behind only a headless corpse. Unlike the Dullahan's grim precision, this creature thrives on deception, its shape-shifting nature reflecting the treacherous whims of rivers and tides. Yet both share that eerie decapitation motif, a reminder that water, like death, can erase a person as thoroughly as a blade. Then there's France's Cheval Mallet, a demonic horse whose name means mallet or crusher. Clad in chains and breathing sulfur, it tramples those foolish enough to hitch it to their carts. While it doesn't lack a head, its victims often do decapitation by snapped harness or flying debris. Here, the horror isn't just the missing head but the randomness of the violence, a reflection of peasant fears about farm accidents and the brutal machinery of feudal life. The Dullahan serves death, the shovel mallet embodies chaos, proving how similar fears wear different masks. Now pivot east to the Hindu goddess Chinnamasta, who severs her own head to feed her devotees with blood from her neck. Far from a monster, she's a symbol of sacrifice and rebirth, decapitation as an act of creation, not destruction. This flips the script entirely. Where the Dullahan's severed head signals irreversible loss, Chinnamasta's represents the cyclical nature of existence. The contrast couldn't be starker. One culture's terror is another's transcendent truth. So are these parallels proof of universal human fears, or evidence of stories spreading along trade routes and migrations? The answer might lie in bones, from the Neolithic tombs of Europe to the headless corpses in Mesoamerican cenotes. Archaeology shows a global preoccupation with skulls as vessels of power. Whether through war, ritual, or myth, civilizations grappled with the same visceral image the moment the head parts from the body, and with it the self. The Dullahan, the Cephal DW circumflexor, and Chinnamasta aren't copies of each other. They're variations on a theme, like musicians in different lands playing the same haunting chord. Yet details matter. The Welsh horse drowns, the French horse crushes, the Irish horseman judges. Each nuance mirrors the landscapes and histories that shaped them. Rivers demand respect in Wales, agriculture dominates France, and Ireland's law revolves around fate's inevitability. Even Chinnamasta's self-decapitation ties to tantric practices alien to Europe. These spirits aren't just about death, they're cultural fingerprints pressed into the same universal parchment. The next time you hear hoofbeats in the dark, ask yourself, is it the Dullahan riding or something equally old, equally hungry, wearing a face or lack thereof you've never seen before? The Dullahan's horse isn't just transportation, it's a grim masterpiece of symbolism, a creature carved from the same shadows as its rider. Towering and jet black, with eyes that burn like embers from a funeral pyre, this steed moves with an unnatural silence, its hooves leaving no mark on the earth. But to understand why this phantom horse chills the blood, we must first grasp how deeply the Celts revered horses, and how the Dullahan's mount inverts that reverence into something terrifying. Long before the Headless Horseman haunted Ireland's backroads, the Celtic goddess Epona galloped through their myths, her name whispered with reverence from Gaul to Britain. Patron of horses' fertility and sovereignty, Epona embodied life's vitality. Her white steeds carried kings to power, her presence blessed the land with abundance. Even the Romans, who rarely adopted foreign deities, worshipped her in their stables. Horses weren't just animals to the Celts, they were bridges between worlds, creatures capable of carrying souls to the otherworld and back. Their speed symbolized freedom, their strength mirrored the warrior's spirit. Now contrast that with the Dullahan's mount, where Epona's horses shine like sunlight on morning dew. This creature is a void on legs, its coat absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Where heroic steeds like Cú Chulain's Liath Matcha roar into battle with sparks flying from their hooves, the Dullahan's horse moves in utter silence, as if death itself has muted the world around it. The Celts believed a horse's neigh could scare off evil spirits, but this beast makes no sound at all, its presence marked only by the creeping dread that coils in your stomach. This inversion is deliberate. The Dullahan's horse isn't a companion, it's a predator, a perversion of everything Epona's sacred animals represented. The parallels run deeper. Irish legends often depict horses as judges of character. The hero lug refuses a king's throne until the royal horse acknowledges him by neighing, a sign of divine approval. But the Dullahan's horse offers no such validation. It doesn't choose, it obeys. Its loyalty lies not with the living but with the inevitable, carrying its master to each fated encounter without hesitation. There's no bargaining with this creature, no appealing to its spirit. It's as mechanical as a coffin lowering into the ground, a stark reminder that death shows no favoritism. Yet the horse's most unsettling feature isn't its appearance or silence, it's the way it blurs the line between flesh and phantom. Some tales describe its breath frosting the air even in summer, while others claim its hooves pass through solid stone. This isn't a mere animal but a manifestation, a living symbol of death's inexorable march. In a culture where horses were partners in life, the Dullahan steed becomes the ultimate betrayal, a once noble creature turned harbinger of the end. The irony is bitter. The same people who celebrated horses as emblems of victory and vitality also conjured their darkest counterpart. Perhaps that's why the image lingers, because the Dullahan's horse isn't just a monster. It's a corrupted promise, a reminder that even the things we cherish can be twisted by the unknown. And when its hoofbeats finally fade into the night, you're left with a chilling truth: some rides don't end at the horizon. They end in the grave. Most tales paint the Dullahan as a towering masculine spectre, but dig deeper into Ireland's folklore and you'll unearth whispers of the Banshee Gan Ceann, the headless Banshee. These rare female variants shatter the assumption that death's enforcer must wear a man's shape. In County Clare, elders still speak of a spectral woman riding a skeletal mare, her severed head cradled against her chest like a swaddled infant. Unlike her male counterpart's stoic brutality, she wails as she rides, merging the Dullahan's dread with the Banshee's mournful aria. Her origins: some say she was a midwife cursed for stealing fairy herbs, others claim she's a mother who took her own life after losing a child. Either way, her presence twists the trope here. Headlessness becomes a metaphor for shattered nurturing, the ultimate mother stripped of the face that soothed her children. This gendered divide in death omens isn't unique to Ireland. Across Europe, female spirits like the Slavic Rusalka or the Germanic Frau Hall often personify watery, cyclical ends, drowning, fading, or lulling victims into eternal sleep. Male phantoms, by contrast, bring violence, decapitation, crushing force, the whip crack of finality. The Dullahan's default masculinity aligns with this pattern: death as an executioner, not a mourner. But why? Anthropology offers clues. In societies where men controlled warfare and public justice, death's active agents took male forms. Women, relegated to keening and vigil keeping, became associated with passive omens like the Banshee's cry. The female Dullahan disrupts this binary, wielding both the horseman's agency and the Banshee's grief. Yet even these exceptions reinforce deeper biases. Notice how the male Dullahan's backstory is rarely explored. He simply is a force as impersonal as a storm. The female variant, though, almost always bears a tragic tale, her monstrosity rooted in emotional ruin. It's as if folklore can't imagine a woman embracing monstrosity without justification, while men get to revel in primal terror unchecked. Compare this to Scotland's Nicnavin, the witch queen who rides the night sans apology, and you'll see how Ireland's female Dullahan straddles the line between power and pathos. Perhaps the most provocative twist comes from Kerry, where a 19th-century hedge school teacher recorded a tale of the Dullahan Dubh, a headless woman said to be a pagan priestess decapitated by Christians. Here, the spectre doesn't wail or mourn. She judges, targeting clergy and scoffers with the same impartial cruelty as her male counterparts. This version reclaims agency, suggesting that when women do break the mold, they terrify precisely because they refuse to fit neat archetypes. The Dullahan, it seems, wears many faces under its missing head, and some of them have always been female. The spirit of folk festival in County Meath isn't just a celebration of Ireland's musical roots, it's a living, breathing revival of the Dullahan's legend, where the boundary between myth and modernity blurs under the glow of bonfires. Each autumn, as the air turns crisp and the nights stretch long, performers clad in tattered black robes and skeletal masks take to the streets, their hollow-eyed lantern heads casting eerie shadows across the crowd. This isn't cheap Halloween theatrics, it's a deliberate reclamation of folklore, a way to keep the horseman's story etched into collective memory. Festival organizer Clodagh Bayan describes it as feeding the old stories to the new generations, transforming passive listeners into participants in a ritual older than the oldest standing stone. But why does this particular legend endure when so many others fade? Asked Niall O'Donnell, a third-generation Ceann, a traditional Irish storyteller who weaves the Dullahan's tale into his performances. The horseman isn't just a ghost story, he explains, hands gesturing like a conductor drawing terror from the air. He's a mirror. In a world obsessed with avoiding death, the Dullahan forces us to stare it in the face, or rather, the lack of one. O'Donnell's renditions don't soften the horror. He leans into the spine whip's crack, the wagon's shriek, the unbearable silence before the name is called. Yet audiences, especially younger ones, flock to his fireside sessions. There's a catharsis in the fear, a shared acknowledgement of mortality that somehow feels less lonely when voiced aloud. Beyond Ireland's borders, the Dullahan gallops into other festivals too. At Scotland's Samhain Fire Festival in Edinburgh, performers reinterpret the legend through bone-rattling drum processions and stilt-walking spectres, blending Celtic traditions with contemporary street theatre. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the Catskills Irish Arts Week hosts Dullahan Nights, where fiddlers play reels in minor keys to mimic the horseman's approach, and children dare each other to peer into makeshift lantern heads crafted from carved pumpkins, a nod to the legend's American cousin in Sleepy Hollow. What unites these events isn't just nostalgia, it's adaptability. In Meath, storytellers now frame the Dullahan as an ecological omen, a warning against humanity's reckless march toward environmental collapse. The horseman doesn't just collect souls, says performer Aisling Keogh, her face half hidden by a painted leather mask. He's the reckoning for a world out of balance. This reinterpretation resonates in an age of climate anxiety, proving folklore's power to morph without losing its teeth. Yet for all the modern twists, the core ritual remains unchanged. As the festival reaches its climax, attendees join a procession carrying lanterns shaped like severed heads, their flickering lights bobbing like will-o'-the wisps along the old road to Tara. Here, where ancient kings were crowned, the crowd falls silent, not in fear but in recognition. The Dullahan may ride for souls, but tonight he also rides for remembrance, his legend kept alive not by books or screens, but by the collective breath of those still willing to listen when the night grows dark and the wind sounds almost like hoofbeats. The bogs of Ireland hold more than water, they cradle bones, and some of these bones whisper secrets that send shivers down the spines of archaeologists. Take the discovery in 1985 at Croghan Hill, where workers cutting peat unearthed the remains of old Croghan Man, a 2,000-year-old Iron Age victim with one glaring absence, his head. His perfectly preserved torso, still bearing the leather armband of a warrior, ended abruptly at the neck, the vertebrae cleanly severed. Nearby, another headless body surfaced, this one with hazel rods driven through his arms, a clear sign of ritual killing. These aren't isolated cases. Across Ireland, from the wetlands of Meath to the rocky outcrops of Antrim, headless burials pepper the archaeological record, their silent testimony fueling theories about the Dullahan's grisly origins. What makes these finds so chilling isn't just the violence, but the precision. In Dublin's Temple Bar district, excavators uncovered a mass grave with 8 skeletons, all missing skulls, arranged in a circle like some macabre offering. Forensic analysis revealed the decapitations weren't battlefield casualties, the cuts were methodical, practiced, likely performed post-mortem as part of a rite we can barely fathom today. The Celts, it seems, didn't just remove heads, they curated them. Roman historian Diodorus Siculus wrote of Gaulish warriors preserving enemy heads in cedar oil, displaying them as trophies on doorposts. Ireland's headless burials suggest a darker parallel. What if some heads weren't taken in war but given in sacrifice? the connection to the Dullahan lies in these rituals' spiritual weight. The Celts believed the head housed the soul's essence, the seat of wisdom, memory, and identity. To separate it from the body wasn't just killing, it was a metaphysical theft, a way to harness power or appease gods like Crom Dubh. When archaeologists find a skeleton with its skull carefully placed at its feet, as in a burial at Raffin Fort, they're glimpsing a worldview where the line between reverence and terror blurred. The Dullahan, carrying its own head as a lantern, inverts this practice, no longer a triumphant warrior displaying a trophy, but a damned soul forever severed from its own essence. But here's the twist that haunts historians. Some headless burials, like those at Knockalin in County Kildare, show no signs of trauma, no cut marks, no violence. These individuals were buried headless, yes, but their heads may have been removed long after death, perhaps during secondary burial rites. Why? One theory points to the Celtic cult of the ancestors, where skulls were kept as conduits to the otherworld, consulted for prophecies or protection. The Dullahan's lantern head, glowing with unnatural light, might echo this belief. A severed skull repurposed not as a trophy, but as a guide through the darkness between worlds. The most compelling evidence, though, comes from the artifacts left behind. At the hill fort of Dullahan, excavators found a ceremonial headdress near a headless skeleton, its bronze embellishments suggesting royalty or priesthood. This wasn't a random act of desecration, it was a targeted removal of power, a ritual beheading meant to neutralize or transfer authority. In this light, the Dullahan's missing head becomes more than a horror trope. It's a cultural scar, a remnant of a time when losing your head meant losing your place in the cosmic order. The horseman's eternal ride, then, isn't just punishment. It's a distorted memory of what once was sacred, warped by time into something monstrous. Modern technology adds another layer to the mystery. Isotope analysis on decapitated remains from Island Magi in Antrim revealed some victims weren't local. They'd traveled great distances before their deaths. Were they hostages, pilgrims, or sacrificial offerings brought to sacred sites for rituals now lost to history? The Dullahan, too, is a traveler crossing boundaries between parishes, between worlds. Its legend may preserve fragments of these ancient rites, where the movement of heads, whether as trophies, relics, or warnings, wasn't just brutality, but a language of power written in bone. The soil of Ireland still yields clues. In 2018, a farmer in County Offaly stumbled upon another bog body, this one with its head intact but its arms severed cleanly at the shoulders. The discovery sparked fresh debates. If heads were so sacred, why take arms instead? Perhaps the answer lies in the Dullahan's whip, that spine-like lash said to sever souls. Archaeology and myth aren't opposing forces, they're strands of the same story, twisting together across centuries. Every unearthed skeleton, every rusted blade, every whispered tale of the Headless Horseman brings us closer to understanding a people who saw death not as an end, but as a transaction, one where the price was often paid in flesh, and the change came in the form of legends that still ride the night winds today. Is the Dullahan silent as the grave, or does its voice crack the night air like shattered glass? Folklore paints two starkly different portraits, one of a mute spectre whose terror lies in wordless menace, the other a shrieking herald whose call spells instant doom. This contradiction isn't just inconsistency, it's a window into how fear shapes stories over time. Take County Mayo's tales, where the horseman glides without sound, its presence marked only by the stench of decay and the crack of its spine whip. Here, silence becomes its weapon, the absence of sound magnifying the imagination's horrors. Yet cross into Kerry, and you'll hear of a Dullahan whose disembodied head howls names across moonlit fields, its voice rasping like rusted hinges. Victims drop dead mid-step, their hearts frozen mid-beat by the sheer sonic brutality of their own names twisted into curses. The Banshee's wail offers a clue to this duality. Both creatures serve as death messengers, but where the Banshee's cry is a lament, a warning steeped in sorrow, the Dullahan's voice, when it appears, is pure execution. Its scream doesn't mourn, it enacts. Some scholars argue this reflects regional attitudes toward fate. In areas where death was seen as inevitable and communal, like Banshee-haunted territories, warnings carried emotional weight. But where mortality felt capricious, a lightning strike, rather than a slow tide, the Dullahan's sudden vocal violence mirrored that unpredictability. Yet even the screaming versions obey eerie rules. The voice never speaks conversationally, it only names or howls. No bargaining, no explanation, just a single syllable sealing your fate. This linguistic restraint ties back to Celtic taboos around true names and their power. To speak someone's name was to hold their soul in your mouth. For the Dullahan, to do so is to consume it. Modern paranormal enthusiasts have tried linking this to infrasound frequencies below human hearing that can induce dread or even cardiac arrest. Could centuries of silent Dullahan encounters actually describe this physiological terror, while the screaming accounts literalize the experience? The most chilling resolution comes from Leitrim's folktales, which split the difference. The Dullahan is mute until it sights prey. Then its severed head unleashes a cry that's not a voice at all, but the sound of 100 graves cracking open at once. This version suggests the contradiction is intentional, that the creature's silence is its scream, a paradox the human mind can only process by fracturing into opposing descriptions. After all, how else would you describe the sound of death itself riding toward you in the dark? The answer, it seems, depends on whether you live long enough to tell the tale. Hollywood's version of the Dullahan often feels like a bad photocopy, faded, distorted, and missing the soul of the original. Take the blockbuster Hellboy Roman II, The Golden Army, where the creature appears as a hulking, sword-wielding brute with flaming eyes, stripped of its lore and repackaged as generic fantasy canon fodder. The whip of human spine gone, the silent judicial terror replaced with growling monologues. This isn't just creative license, it's cultural erasure, sanding down a complex symbol of Irish folklore into a stock monster for global audiences. Dr. Shebra Aiken, a folklore scholar at University College Dublin, compares it to taking the Book of Kells and doodling cartoon faces in the margins. The Dullahan isn't just a spooky prop, it's a vessel of cultural memory, and when its nuances are ignored, the story isn't just changed, it's colonized. The backlash isn't confined to academia. Irish creators like cartoonist Padraig O'Acute Mayaloid have lampooned Hollywood's take, depicting the Dullahan as a frustrated artist holding a shredded script titled Authentic Lore. It's satire with teeth. O'Acute Mayaloid's work taps into a deeper frustration. When non-Irish media reduces the horseman to a headless jump scare, they're perpetuating a pattern of treating Celtic mythology as public domain raw material, free for pillaging without context. Contrast this with Japan's Dullahan in D. Grey Man, which, while fantastical, at least nods to the original's role as a death omen, proof that adaptation doesn't require amputation. Reclaiming the narrative isn't just about criticism, it's about creation. Projects like The Hallow, a horror film shot in Ireland with Irish directors and folklorists consulting, deliberately reroot the Dullahan in its cultural soil. Here, the spectre isn't a lone bogeyman but part of an ecosystem of fear, tied to land disputes and ecological rage, themes ripped from Ireland's own history. Meanwhile, authors like Oisin McGann weave the horseman into your novels as a judge of moral decay, not just a bringer of death. These aren't just stories, they're corrective lenses, refocusing a myth that's been blurred by outsider hands. Yet the debate isn't black and white. Some argue folklore has always evolved through retelling, and gatekeeping risks fossilizing living traditions. But evolution isn't the same as extraction. When American TV's Supernatural turned the Dullahan into a vengeful spirit haunting Illinois cornfields, complete with a backstory involving colonial witch trials. It didn't evolve the myth, it overwrote it. The difference: consent. Irish storytellers have spent centuries honing these tales. Skipping their insight isn't adaptation, it's appropriation. The fight for authenticity isn't just academic, it's economic. When Netflix's Cursed, a mishmash of Arthurian and Celtic tropes, featured a headless knight with zero ties to Irish lore, it wasn't just a creative choice, it was a missed opportunity to hire Irish writers or consult local experts. Dr. Eadhon Oacute Sullivane's #Dullahan Done Right campaign pushes studios to partner with Irish artists, arguing that authenticity isn't a constraint but a competitive edge. After all, Ireland's myths survived famine, conquest, and censorship. They deserve more than to be chewed up by the content mill and spat out as algorithm-friendly slop. Perhaps the sharpest irony: the Dullahan itself was once a guardian of boundaries, an enforcer of the line between living and dead. Now it's become a symbol of another kind of boundary: who gets to tell a culture's stories and how much respect they owe the source. The horseman's original sin wasn't taking heads, it was refusing to let the dead speak for themselves. Modern retellings risk repeating that crime unless they're willing to listen. The Dullahan's shadow stretches far beyond Irish hedgerows. Its influence seeps into the very marrow of modern horror, shaping tropes we now take for granted. Consider the vengeful spirit, that staple of ghost stories and haunted house films. While Japan's Yurei and Gothic literature's spectres have their own pedigrees, the Dullahan's blend of relentless pursuit and inescapable fate crystallized a template for supernatural retribution. Take the Grudge's Kayako, her croaking death rattle echoing the Dullahan's name whispered doom, or It Follows with its slow, inevitable stalker. Both inherit the horseman's cold certainty that once marked, you cannot outrun what comes. Even the Final Destination series, where death itself becomes a calculating force rearranging accidents like a macabre chess game, owes a debt to the Dullahan's impersonal, systemized slaughter. Then there are the cursed objects, those everyday items turned vessels of horror. The Dullahan's spine whip and lantern head pioneered this trope centuries before Annabelle or The Ring's videotape. Its artifacts aren't just tools, they're extensions of its curse, carrying tainted power long after their wielder vanishes. M.R. James, the early 20th century master of antiquarian horror, understood this instinctively. In Lost Hearts, a story dripping with decapitation imagery, a demonic child's ghost carries a harp strung with human hair, a clear nod to Celtic head cults and their gruesome relics. James's protagonists often unearth objects that awaken ancient wrath, mirroring how the Dullahan's whip or lantern might surface in a museum display or attic trunk, pulsing with dormant malice. Modern horror gaming amplifies these themes. Dark Souls' headless knights lumber through foggy battlefields, their missing skulls invoking the Dullahan's aesthetic, while The Witcher 3 reimagines the horseman as a spectral judge who collects debts in blood. Even Silent Hill's Pyramid Head, though visually distinct, channels the same dread. A silent executioner shaped by collective guilt, the Dullahan's DNA surfaces in subtler ways too. The Slender Man mythos, with its faceless stalker and compulsive documentation of victims, mirrors the horseman's name-calling horror. Both prey on the fear of being singled out, of hearing your own identity weaponized against you. What makes the Dullahan's legacy unique isn't just its imagery, but its philosophy. Unlike vampires or werewolves, which represent corrupted humanity, the horseman is an abstraction, death stripped of metaphor. This purity birthed horror's force of nature villains, from Halloween's Michael Myers to the Terminator. No motive, no monologue, just machinery wrapped in flesh. Even Hereditary's decapitation fixation and the Babadook's maternal grief monster trace back to the Dullahan's dual nature, an omen that's both deeply personal and utterly indifferent. Yet the most telling homage lies in what's absent. The Dullahan's silence the void where its voice should be inspired, horror's use of negative space. Blair Witch Project's unseen terror, A Quiet Place's sound-sensitive monsters, even Bird Box's vision-based doom, all stem from the same primal fear the horseman exploited, that what you don't perceive is deadlier than what you do. The Dullahan taught horror that true terror isn't in the scream but in the breath before it, and as long as storytellers need to make audiences hold theirs, the horseman will keep riding. From the blood-soaked rituals of Crom Dubh to the neon glow of video game screens, the Dullahan has ridden a longer road than any phantom could fathom. What began as a manifestation of ancient Celtic fears, harvest gods demanding sacrifice, warriors stealing souls through severed heads, has twisted and split like the roots of an old hawthorn tree, branching into 1,000 modern nightmares. This isn't just the evolution of a folktale. It's a map of humanity's deepest anxieties, redrawn across centuries but always leading back to the same dark crossroads. Consider the sheer staying power of that headless silhouette. Whether carved into medieval stone or rendered in pixels, the image resonates because it taps into something primal, the terror of identity erased. The Celts feared losing their heads because it meant losing their place in the afterlife. Today, we fear faceless algorithms harvesting our data, AI-generated voices mimicking loved ones, modern decapitations of a different sort. The Dullahan adapts because the core dread remains unchanged. A Victorian farmer hearing hoofbeats on a lonely road and a teenager scrolling through a creepypasta at midnight both shudder at the same question. What happens when the thing hunting you doesn't need a face to see you? Yet for all its transformations, the horseman's roots still grip the Irish soil. Hollywood might reduce it to a fiery-skulled boss battle, but in County Sligo, elders still refuse to say its name after sunset. Scholars debate whether it's a degraded god or a Christianized demon, but in a Kerry pub the debate is simpler. Did you hear about old Murphy's dog last Samhain? How it howled at nothing, no, not nothing, at something only dogs and the dead can see. The Dullahan thrives in this liminal space between academia and oral tradition, equally at home in JSTOR journals and campfire whispers. So why do headless phantoms haunt us? Because they're the ultimate universal metaphor. Japan's Rokyu by-stretches its neck, not loses its head, but the horror is the same, the body betraying the self. Sleep paralysis demons across cultures often appear as faceless watchers because the brain, when stripped of control, defaults to that fundamental fear, the obliteration of you. The Dullahan's genius lies in its simplicity. It doesn't need elaborate backstories or tragic motives. It just is as inevitable as the last heartbeat, as inexplicable as the hole where its head should be. Which brings us to the real secret. The Dullahan was never the monster. It's the mirror. Every era gets the horseman it deserves. Pagans saw divine justice. Christians saw hell's bounty hunter. Victorians saw Gothic romance. We see existential dread. The spectre reflects whatever we're most afraid of: losing our souls, our sanity, our autonomy in a world that feels increasingly like it's being piloted by unseen forces. So next time you hear hoofbeats in the dark, whether it's the wind in the trees, a distant engine, or nothing at all, resist the urge to look back. Not because you might see the Dullahan, but because you might recognize what it's really carrying. Not a lantern, but a reflection of whatever keeps you awake at night. Now over to you. Have you ever met something you couldn't explain? Share your encounters below, and who knows, maybe the horseman's next name will be whispered from your